Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Crypto Hipsters Podcast, where I interview founders and co founders, entrepreneurs and artists, executives and stay at home hipsters in crypto and blockchain around the world. And I have an amazing podcast for you today. Let's get to it. Today, it is around the world today. My guest comes from Taiwan right now. His name is Joshua Tobkin. He is the co-founder and CEO of SupraOracles. Joshua, welcome.
Great to be here, Jamil.
It's an honor to have you join me today. So let's kick things off. And the first question I ask my guests is this: is what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Well, my background has been kind of eclectic, actually. Um, Back in, let's see, 24 years ago, when I was around 12 years old, I was actually at the time living in China, and I did attend an international school there. Nonetheless, I was also kind of in a remote area outside of the main city. So I was kind of isolated, actually. I had my brother and sister, great, and we had fun. Of course, we had some neighbors, but we also had the internet connection. And I got absolutely obsessed with the internet at a super early age. Actually, I think I started at 11, trying to make websites on a platform called GeoCities at the time. Taking a look, trying to right click and view the kind of JavaScript and code and HTML, very rudimentary stuff at the time, like I think they're called applets and such, and just obsessed of like, I just want to be able to create my own, like, there wasn't so much you could do there, but I wanted to create some page. It got to the point where, my parents would be yelling at me to come downstairs, come to dinner, and I just didn't want to leave. And so I naturally had this. Now, to fast forward a little bit, I did go to boarding school because I was a little bit naughty, kind of a little bit of rebellious. And there they actually did not have internet connection. So I kind of lost touch for like 4 years. But when I got back to high school several years later, I kind of rekindled that love for building on the net. Now, I graduated high school thinking actually, and I thought really deeply about this, like what would be the best way to make an impact in the world. And at that time, I had already traveled to maybe 29 countries, and I've lived in several at that stage. And I thought economics was actually the answer to make, if you could really change the world through economic policy and such. Um, get to university, full ride to study economics, and actually absolutely hated it. In the first year and a half, I was bored to death, and felt like it just didn't feel like I was fulfilling my life's mission. Going back to my roots, I always loved to create on the web and such. So one thing that did draw my interest actually is online poker. So I ended up dropping out from school to play poker semi-professionally, and it was awesome. I was in New Jersey at the time. You know that movie Rounders, right? I was pretty much living that lifestyle, both online and going to underground casinos, illegal clubs, and also getting kicked out of casinos because I was under 21. Had a great time, but that was a pretty wild time too. Like you have really, really high highs and really low lows in that kind of lifestyle. And to balance that out, I kind of went back to my web building entrepreneurial roots and created a service for the online poker community, which is Rakeback, which is like cashback. So poker players play online, and we have arrangements with these online casinos through an affiliate arrangement where we will give you back part of the fees that you generate. And I did that for years, and we started growing to become meaningful rakeback providers. However, there was something called Black Friday, in which online poker became illegal in the United States. At that stage, I also felt like it was time to transition to something else. Sold my shares to my partner. He went on to continue to build the business internationally and did really well. Um, it's kind of funny because when online poker got illegal in the United States, Bitcoin was also just starting to come up. And I kind of just missed that transition. I heard of Bitcoin, but I never got into it. And if I stayed with that project, we would have probably been done very well with taking Bitcoin. Long story short, though, bounced around, experimented with many things. From at that period, I was actually pretty into SMS technology. I was like, oh, this is kind of a new format. before like Twilio got huge. And then I just did a lot of experimentation. So, my background, is it logical for crypto? The answer is yes, only in that I was insatiably curious and had this kind of econ background and also self-taught computer scientist, right? Had to learn almost everything on my own because I did, forfeit the scholarship, right? And I kind of probably learned really slowly, but I learned things in such a way that I got a really good fingertip feel for how these things interact and how, and that's kind of my story. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So I have a follow up there, but I'm going to ask you to follow up a little bit later because I think it's important. Like really important. But first question I'll ask you is this: is what is SupraOracles and what makes it great, and then sets it apart from there are a bunch of other oracles out there. So what sets you apart, makes you guys unique?
Sure. So SupraOracles as you can tell, it's a Oracle service. Oracles are these mechanisms or nodes networks where we can bring external data on chain. Now, blockchains are actually closed loop systems. They don't communicate with the outside world, the traditional blockchains, right? So, yet they're very, very secure. Like the decentralized, distributed nature of all these nodes, it's a very secure network. In fact, if it's properly distributed, you can't, even as a state level government, try to force a double spend. It's infeasible. Now, the thing is, though, blockchains with only blockchain data is kind of limited in scope of what you can do with it in smart contracts. The moment you can bring external data into a blockchain, the use case of smart contracts explodes, right? So many more things you could do. Now, the thing is, we go through all the trouble to secure blockchain, right? And however, this Oracle layer, a layer above, is actually not applying the same security principles or guarantees. So this is actually kind of a weaker layer. And in fact, it makes a lot of sense to apply the same security guarantees as the underlying network, right? So what we are actually doing, what makes this really different, is we are not just some small clusters of nodes here and there. We're actually a unified network. And we have a unified security protocol. We are bringing layer one principles to the Oracle space. So we're applying layer one consensus protocols to the Oracle space. So we have these extremely strong security guarantees while also being very fast to compute. And we do this through parallel processing. So we can get assurance from multiple data sources simultaneously and run cryptographic threshold signatures and cryptographic proofs to show without a shadow of doubt that this has been calculated transparently and correctly. And what makes us different than others is off the charts, we have much more security, order of magnitude more security, while also being faster. So smart contracts that can react with data guarantees that are, highly accurate, but also reacting to the real world events with lower latency, right? Faster. That actually gives us, an edge.
Now you define, you mentioned on your website there's an oracle problem, right? So what is the oracle problem, and how do you solve it?
Sure. Just like there's in regular blockchain, there's this trilemma, right? You have security versus decentralization versus performance, right? And kind of similar applies to the Oracle dilemma. In Oracle space, usually similarly, if you have more nodes, it takes longer to compute security and to finalize the results. And if you don't have more nodes, though, then your security is bound by the number of nodes. So you actually want more nodes, right? However, you want to be able to have fast finality and have your performance not be affected by the number of nodes you have. So that's what you want to solve for. You want to solve for data guarantees that are off the charts, like layer one. You will not have a incorrect data entering the blockchain in, frankly, weird design as to it should never happen. Actually, like that's kind of level of rigor we're trying to bring to this. So nearly almost never should we ever let bad data into a blockchain. Yet we have to do this in a way that is fast, right? So what we do is we really rely on parallel compute and cryptographic primitives to prove that this has been computed at the same time, and they've come to the same consensus on what the answer is in parallel. So the time that one set of nodes can do it, the other set of nodes also came to the same conclusion in the same parallel time.
You're blockchain agnostic, right? You work with
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah. So correct. We are. That's what's wonderful about us is we get to play with multiple ecosystems. So we do, and we're planning to bridge our data into all the popular blockchains. So from Ethereum to EVM compatible chains to Cosmos ecosystem and even like Solana and you know when I say EVM compatible chains, that includes Avalanche, Polygon, etc. And perhaps even Tezos. So we have these ongoing conversations. Every integration we decide to make is actually a very strong long-term commitment because we want to maintain that service. And so we have actually a lot of layer ones sending us funds and grants and such to get us to build on them. However, we take it very slowly to make sure that when we do commit, it's basically marriage for life, right? And part of that commitment process is to analyze what is the integration look like, right? From a consensus algorithm point of view, finality perspective, communication, meaning like how do our chains or our networks communicate with each other on a cryptographic level? Are they compatible, or do we have to speak multiple languages? These are all multiple decisions that we need to be thinking through before we ever make a commitment.
That sounds good. So I want to back up a little bit. So I had a follow up from your intro question, right? You were in New Jersey and a poker player, and I have friends that I went to high school with, I grew up with, that are poker players in New Jersey, and I grew up in New Jersey, right? But now you're in Taiwan, right? So why are you building from Tai? I mean, I think I might know the answer, I might not. Why are you building from Taiwan?
Yeah, yeah. So okay, so I was in Jersey for a while. It was a hell of an experience, I gotta say. I grew up there. Like when I say grew up, I like really matured as a human being because it was actually there's a lot of ghetto in Jersey too, what I'm saying. And there's a lot, it can be pretty rough, but it's also has nice neighborhoods, of course, right? Um, but that actually was from age, let's say, 19 to about 26. And then by then I started working in New York City, right off of Madison Avenue, and was there for about 2 years, kind of commuting, doing the whole commute thing. That was the first time I actually had quote unquote a job at it was another startup, and I actually learned a ton there, because I got to be kind of tutored from other mentors that have actually had multiple large exits before, so I got some good kind of insight there. They opened up an office in San Francisco. I was the third employee there, so I moved to San Francisco from there. And I was in SF for about 4 years, and that's around the period where I learned about blockchain. Long story short, how did I end up in Taiwan? I had actually never been to Taiwan up to this point in my life. However, I got introduced through a childhood friend who actually spent some time in Jersey and Connecticut, right? But I've known him since elementary school. He knew a mutual friend in the blockchain space that was in Taiwan. He connected me online. This gentleman, John Jones, my current co-founder, he is an American actually. Grew up in New York, but went to school in Berkeley. And I was in the Bay Area. He flew over for San Francisco Blockchain Week. We met up for the first time on the back of a napkin at a bar. I pitched him this new way to secure blockchain using randomness and our network architecture, which is quite unique. And about 45 days later, after we went back home, he was living in Taiwan. His wife is Taiwanese, and he was growing a family there. About 45 days later, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, Josh, I think what you're doing is really interesting. I'd like to invest. I'd like to become co-founders." He was already in the blockchain space. He's built up somewhat of a foundation here through events and such. He was kind of doing intending to build a incubator in the blockchain space in Taiwan, as well as a marketing kind of events company, and invited me over there. Said, "Hey, look, SF is definitely way too expensive to bootstrap," and I agreed. And I flew out there. We went to Taipei Blockchain Week or event, Seoul, Korea for blockchain events there, Singapore, Hong Kong. Went through that whole Asian circuit, kind of got acclimated with the space again. I hadn't been to Asia really properly for about a decade since then, and I was like, dude, this could work for me. So I've been here for about 3.5 years since.
That's awesome. I love the story, and it wasn't the answer I expected. I
Well,
expect,
did
you know,
yeah, you might have expected regulatory arbitrage, etc. That is
yeah,
part of the story.
yeah, because you said you made online poker illegal, and they also the SEC recently killed the SPAC market, and they're trying to kill the retail crypto market. So I was, you know, how can the U.S. compete if they try to keep killing innovation? And why should founders go overseas?
Yeah, that is okay. So that did actually play into this, with the way that we have set ourselves up. First of all, we've consulted with many really great lawyers, legal teams. I want to emphasize more than one, right? And you should talk to get multiple opinions. Some lawyers might just say, "Oh, it's too risky, don't do it." But there's actually really ways to do this. You know, as Americans, actually, I'm an American too. Our co-founders are all American, actually. So we have to be careful about how we do this. And going offshore is one way. Also, not selling tokens to Americans, unfortunately, is a way to kind of shield yourself. So someday we may do a public sale, right? But at this moment, it does not seem like we're going to be selling to any Americans unless they have ORC entities themselves. So that is too bad, for opportunities for Americans to have exposure to some of these networks that could possibly someday be worth a lot. It's really too bad that they just can't participate.
Yeah, tell me about it. But I love what I'm doing. So let me ask you this, and this goes along into transparency. Um, what is the danger? Like, one of the concerns is transparency. What is the danger of having a lack of transparency, and then how does that danger apply to, like, widespread use of privacy coins like Monero, and recently with Mimblewimble, Litecoin, and all that?
So a lack of transparency, just in, maybe I can just talk about the traditional markets, and I can talk about, what the difference is. So, in traditional markets, when you have this lack of transparency, when you have, you know, ratings agencies giving AAA ratings to, garbage, that was kind of ultimately led to the 2008 crisis, or housing crisis, mortgage crisis. Um, that kind of systemic risk as a result of this lack of transparency, right? Um, then you have actually today the current commodity markets, right? The real commodity markets when we're talking about physical, delivery of like oil and such. There's a lot of lack of transparency there. I'm not sure how to fix that exactly. This is a very convoluted ecosystem. We have entities. Who are kind of mercenary, who are, even though the U.S. might have sanctions against Russian oil, for example, they are figuring out ways to get Russian oil to other countries, even though they're Americans, and there's kind of this whole lack of transparency there. That's how they can get shielded through this. And there's, but, really what I'm kind of most interested in is a lack of transparency in terms of, systemic risk, right? So when you have blockchain where you actually it's open source, you can look at the code, at least for the most part. You can actually understand what kind of smart contract you're dealing with, and you can see the parameters that they have set. And if these are set correctly, then you avoid the ability to have systemic risk in the first place, right? So that's the way it should be, and that's the way that you can actually build a very interesting, super ultra efficient economy on chain. When it comes to privacy coins, right? And my thoughts on those, I think they're important. I think in a world where they're pushing this narrative of digitalization of money, right? That is actually very, very risky. If you do it in a centralized manner, it's very dystopian. Where a central entity can actually control how you spend your funds. They can pry into everyday use. So that is a major issue. I would say, like, because of that, privacy coins and such they're important. They're important for the preservation of liberty. Now, of course, you mentioned Mimblewimble, and some of these technologies are experimental, and sometimes the implementation doesn't match the actual theory, or there's some missing detail, and as a consequence, the project can have issues because this technology is difficult, right? Nonetheless, I think I'm not entirely sure. Like, look, if you decentralize this enough, I'm not entirely sure that you can stop it, you know, which is a powerful force. And it's a double-edged sword, though, right? Because now you have also, the group that hacked the Ronin blockchain, the Axie Infinity blockchain. That was a cryptographic. They stole somehow hacked the keys just over the validating nodes. They're able to withdraw like $600 million. Now, this is not a failure of the blockchain itself. It was a leakage of the keys. So it was more of a social engineering attack somehow, where the keys got leaked. And to be honest, the way that they handled the keys was a little bit too irresponsible considering the value that they were holding. They should have decentralized that further. Nonetheless, what's happening is apparently that's maybe a North Korean hacker group, very elite group, who is now cashing that $600 million out of Tornado Cash, a privacy protocol on Ethereum. So this is kind of it's one of those things where it's like it's a double-edged sword on privacy, but by and large, I think net is definitely a positive.
Got it. So I'm trying to think back from when I first heard about your company, and I'll tell you a little story. I was on an institutional call, and that I attend like twice a month. And there was a man. I'm not going to name names. He was from SupraOracles, and the question was like, what makes your what makes your company great? And I was driving in my car listening, and he said, I'll never forget this. It's because the wonderful splendor of entropy, and I almost slammed into the car in front of me. I'm like, what? What? you know? But you mentioned that oracles should be accountable, for their actions, and when you have entropy, when you have everything breaking down, when you have VCs who might actually accidentally tank an entire market, you know, um, how are your oracles accountable during the time of entropy?
Yeah, so there's a little story here. So, as I mentioned, blockchains are these closed loop systems. They're actually very orderly. Like everyone is on the same page, and you can't mess it up if you're following the protocol. Yeah, mostly honest majority nodes. So it lacks entropy. Now, we also talk about regulatory arbitrage and how do you do this correctly without getting in trouble, et cetera. But we happen to have some of the better legal minds on the space that advise us on this that have done work for like the folks at like Coinbase, for example. And one of the strategies we have in our setup is a Swiss foundation, right? Which is going to be for the ongoing governance of the network over time, right? Now, this Swiss foundation is actually called Entropy Foundation. We named it that for a reason. It's because blockchains lack any entropy. It's too orderly. You need actual oracles to get this external data on chain to kind of like randomness on chain. You need this in order to do so many things, from fair elections to GameFi in random selection or lotteries, etc., to powering like a poker game, for example. You want provably fairness. You need to use oracles mostly to do that, or very clever cryptographic techniques, both of which we use. Now, so that's the story about where the entry comes from. I think I know who you must be talking about, but that was a kind of our foundation is called Entropy Foundation. We have the domain entropy.foundation. It's kind of under development, but we are also very much like actually our protocol is completely driven by randomness. As at the core, randomness is our security. The unpredictability of which nodes are going to be coalesced and aggregated together to perform which task is our security model, because if you don't know who you're going to be working with in advance, you can't start to collude early. So this randomness is our protection. So we and randomness and entropy in general, these are very, very esoteric topics. I know it's like, why would that be esoteric? Well, it's very bizarre actually when you go into the rabbit hole of like provably fair randomness. And randomness turns out also, and this is something that one of your first questions was like, does your background logically make sense? I actually happen to know the importance of randomness from my other startups, from playing on poker, for computer science, from a security perspective. And I was like, I just knew that there was something to this randomness, and that's why my first time when I was pitching John on the back of napkin is basically a network architecture that leverages randomness to the kilt in order to secure the blockchain and Oracle data on the blockchain. So yeah, so kind of coming back to what you're saying, uh, you know, this idea that, okay, so there is such a thing that where VCs maybe are too leveraged and have a way too strong influence on certain networks, and they can sway the market because these markets are maybe too immature, too small. And well, I can talk about what we've done to try to prevent that, which is we have been very careful to limit what any VC could invest in us. So no one has more than, you know, everyone, let's just say that we capped it from every single round. Now we've had groups that said, hey, we want to invest $10 million. We minimum we do 25 million. And we're like, I'm sorry, everyone's doing 500K. Can you live with that? And it's like comically small to them, right? Because they have a mandate to fill out their huge, fund, et cetera. So we cap them, and we do this to make sure that there is some level of decentralization, so no single party can have too much of a early weight on the network to be able to cause, some sort of undue influence like that. So, we are trying to, from the beginning, we had this mindset. We want to, decentralization matters for, really does come down matter to equitability as well as security. Like we do decentralization so that the network is more stable, actually, you know. So that's these are kind of our ethos, and we've stuck with that from the very beginning.
That makes sense. So that's awesome. Thank you for explaining. That's great. The other thing that you are focused on, and this is true to my heart because I've written 3 books on the topic and have another in the works, is ethics. Um,
Mm,
what should be the role of ethics in decentralized finance protocols?
yeah. So, well, for one, okay, this is a touchy topic, but I'm about to say, um, and I'm not entirely sure what the answer is here. Okay, uh, but I'm not personally a big fan of projects that are not willing to say who they are. Now, I can understand if you're an American and in America and you are worried about doing that. I get that. I'm okay with that. But I have seen time and time again, and it will continue to happen because I've been in this industry 5 years or so. It's too easy to launch a project, have some vulnerability into it, be able to just or have some centralization agent to it. And if you're anonymous, it's too tempting to just say, you know what, I'm too tired. I can't do this anymore, and they just rug it and disappear. There's no social accountability, right? There's no way to go after this person because you don't know who they are, right? So this is way too easy to do that kind of thing, and that's highly unethical, you know. So in terms of ethics, blockchain is not meant to be a casino. I mean, it is, sure, and things start out as games like this. Many things like that is natural. Nonetheless, excuse me. The real promise of blockchain is actually to make the world a much more ethical, fairer place, more equitable place, right? Much more efficient, more transparent, less cheating, all that stuff, right? And you can get these qualities when you have open source code and you know what you're dealing with. So I do believe that it's messy in the beginning. People are making mistakes and human nature takes over. And if you if you really care, I think in the space, you'll do it the right way. Meaning, and that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of folks that are actually care deeply. We care deeply. Yet there's also the crowd that are really hit and run because it's just like too easy. See you later, sucker, kind of folks. And it happens, right? And you know, it, I guess what I'm trying to say is that ethics are important, and also they need to be kind of codified into the DeFi protocol. Meaning, what I'm trying to say here is like, can't not don't be evil, but can't be evil, right? Meaning like you just can't be evil by the way this is coded. Like even and if you decentralize properly, even though the creator, I might be the creator of this thing, if I've built it correctly and it's been inspected and people know what they're dealing with, I wouldn't even be able to change it and change the rules or steal the money you know, even if I later change my mind. Like you want to build it that way where even yourself, you remove yourself out of the equation from the moral dilemma of self-interest. So, yeah, I mean, it's in terms of ethics. I do believe that this technology will bring a more equitable world and a more ethical world. From distribution of wealth to food supply chains to financial inclusion. And yeah, so all this other kind of, excuse my language, but SHIT, it's here. It'll eventually go. Maybe it'll never always go fully, right? But at least the end consumer, those of us that are actually interacting with the blockchain itself, will be more matured and learn from our mistakes. So personal responsibility is really important. Let's put it that way. And so ethics to do the right thing, but also you've got to balance that with the person that's engaging with these things. They should also be taking a lot of personal responsibility. They shouldn't be lazy about this. They should take care of their keys. They should be careful about what they're signing. That kind of stuff.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, awesome. So, I really enjoyed speaking with you today. Thank you for taking my questions. It's been an amazing conversation. Yeah, thank you very much. And I have one last question, and this is going to be probably the easiest one of the interview. How can people find out more information about you, about SupraOracles? How can they, maybe use start to use your middleware, or your oracles? How can they find out more? How can they do any of that?
Yeah. So, our Twitter is SupraOracles.com. Well, actually, not the .com, just at SupraOracles. My Twitter is at Joshua Tobkin. And you can reach out to us on Twitter. It's probably the easiest way. Or you go to our website, SupraOracles.com. And we have some really exciting things that are in the pipeline that maybe I can't share at this moment because we kind of have like a 3-month plan. But I would say go to SupraOracles.com, get onto our contact list or the wait list. We have some very interesting, engaging announcements coming soon. Really great news, incredible news actually. And if you want to be the first to hear this, just get on that list because things are going to really start to heat up in the next few weeks and months to come. And this will be a very interesting year. It'll be kind of a ramp up, but I'll tell you, like we're building slowly but surely something that's really incredible. It goes beyond oracles. It's very fascinating, and I can't wait to share it with y'all. But right now, we've been very close to keeping this close to our chest. We have been in stealth. Like we haven't even mentioned all the large investors that are backing us and the partnerships we're making. This is all very close to our chest at the moment. But I can tell you that we're doing something that's goes way beyond the scope of just oracles, and the future of this industry is going to be very fascinating. So yeah, stay in touch. SupraOracles.com.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
You too. Appreciate it so much.